Maria Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stood behind the kitchen counter of her small restaurant in downtown Phoenix. The lunch rush had just ended, and the familiar sounds of clinking plates and sizzling pans filled the air. She glanced at the clock on the wall, 3:47 p.m. Her daughters, Isabella and Sophia, should have been home from school by now. The restaurant had been Maria's dream for 15 years. She had worked 3 jobs to save enough money to open Casa Rodriguez, a small family establishment that served authentic Mexican cuisine. The walls were painted in warm yellows and oranges, decorated with family photos and handmade crafts from her hometown in Guadalajara. Regular customers knew her by name and she knew their usual orders by heart. But beneath the surface of this peaceful life, Maria carried a heavy secret. 5 years ago, she had witnessed something that changed everything. Late one evening, while walking to her car after closing the restaurant, she had seen 3 men in expensive suits forcing a young woman into a black sedan. The woman's scream still echoed in Maria's nightmares. Without thinking, she had called the police and provided a detailed description of the men and their license plate. The investigation that followed revealed a human trafficking ring operated by the Morales crime family, one of the most dangerous organizations in the Southwest. Maria's testimony had helped convict Carlos Morales, the eldest son of the family patriarch. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The conviction was a major victory for law enforcement, but it made Maria a marked woman. After the trial, Maria had been placed in witness protection for 6 months. The FBI relocated her family to a safe house in Colorado, where they lived under assumed names. Isabella, then 12, and Sophia, only 8, struggled to understand why they couldn't contact their friends or return to their old life. The isolation was suffocating, and Maria watched her daughter's carefree childhood slip away. When the immediate threat seemed to pass, Maria made the difficult decision to leave witness protection. She couldn't bear to see her daughters living in fear, constantly looking over their shoulders. The FBI warned her about the risks, but Maria believed that the Morales family would eventually forget about her. She was wrong. The family returned to Phoenix and tried to rebuild their lives. Maria reopened her restaurant and the girls enrolled in new schools under their real names. For 3 years, life seemed normal again. Isabella, now 17, was an honor student planning to attend college. Sophia, 13, was a talented artist who spent hours sketching in her notebook. They lived in a modest apartment above the restaurant, and Maria felt like they were finally safe. But safety was an illusion. Unknown to Maria, the Morales family had never forgotten her betrayal. Carlos Morales, despite being in prison, still commanded respect and loyalty from his organization. His younger brother, Diego, had taken control of the family's operations and harbored a deep resentment against the woman who had destroyed his brother's freedom. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, as Maria cleaned the last of the lunch dishes, she felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. The girls were usually home by 4 o'clock at the latest. Isabella was responsible and always called if she was going to be late. Sophia might stop to chat with friends, but she knew the rules about coming straight home. Maria tried calling Isabella's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called Sophia's phone with the same result. Her hands began to shake as she dialed the school's main office. The secretary informed her that both girls had left school at the regular dismissal time, 3:15 p.m. The 20-minute walk from Jefferson High School to the restaurant should have taken them past the small park, where Sophia liked to feed the ducks, then down Main Street past the grocery store and the old movie theater. Maria grabbed her keys and locked the restaurant, something she never did during business hours. She drove the route slowly, scanning every sidewalk and storefront. At the park, she stopped and asked an elderly man sitting on a bench if he had seen 2 teenage girls. He shook his head politely. The grocery store clerks hadn't noticed them either. Maria's heart began racing as she drove back to the restaurant, hoping to find her daughters waiting at the door with some innocent explanation for their delay. The apartment above the restaurant was empty. Isabella's backpack wasn't in its usual spot by the door, and Sophia's art supplies were still scattered across the kitchen table from the previous evening. Maria called out their names, her voice echoing through the small rooms. Only silence answered her. She called the police, but the desk sergeant told her that teenagers needed to be missing for 24 hours before they could file an official report, unless there was evidence of foul play. Maria's instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong, but she had no proof. She spent the evening calling Isabella's friends, but none of them had seen her after school. As midnight approached, Maria sat alone in her kitchen, staring at her phone and praying for it to ring. The restaurant below was dark and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. She thought about the Morales family and wondered if her past had finally caught up with her. Outside, a black sedan drove slowly past the restaurant for the third time that night. The driver wore dark sunglasses despite the late hour, and he spoke quietly into a cell phone before disappearing into the darkness. Maria, exhausted and frightened, never saw the car or the man who would soon become the architect of her worst nightmare. The call came at exactly 6 a.m. the next morning. Maria had not slept, instead pacing the floors of her apartment and checking her phone every few minutes. When it finally rang, she answered before the first ring finished. "Hello?" Her voice was hoarse from exhaustion and worry. "Maria Rodriguez." The voice was calm, cold, and unmistakably threatening. It carried a slight accent that made her blood run cold. "I believe you are missing something." Maria's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this? Where are my daughters?" "Your daughters are safe for now. Whether they remain that way depends entirely on your cooperation." The man paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You cost my family something very precious 5 years ago. My brother Carlos sits in a federal prison because of your big mouth." The realization hit Maria like a physical blow. Diego Morales. She had seen his picture in newspaper articles about the trial. A younger man with cruel eyes and an expensive suit. "What do you want?" "Justi, señora. Carlos will be eligible for parole in 18 months if certain evidence disappears. Evidence that includes your testimony and the physical proof you provided to the FBI. Diego's voice remained eerily calm, as if he were discussing the weather. "You are going to help make that happen." Maria sank into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "I can't do that. The FBI has everything in their files. I don't have access to any evidence." "You underestimate yourself, Maria. You know people. You have connections. The FBI agents who worked your case still trust you. Agent Sarah Chen, for example, has visited your restaurant several times over the past year. Such a nice woman, very concerned about your welfare." The mention of Agent Chen's name sent a chill down Maria's spine. Sarah had indeed stopped by the restaurant occasionally, always claiming she was in the neighborhood and wanted to check on Maria's safety. They had developed a friendship of sorts, born from the shared experience of the trial and its aftermath. "You've been watching me." It wasn't a question. "For 3 years, Senora. We know your routine, your friends, your customers. We know that Isabella wants to study journalism at Arizona State University, and that Sophia dreams of becoming an art teacher. Such bright futures ahead of them if they live to see them." Maria closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "They're just children. They had nothing to do with what happened. Neither did Carlos when he was sentenced to rot in prison." Diego's voice hardened. "But life is unfair, no? Sometimes innocent people suffer for the actions of others." The line went quiet for a moment and Maria could hear background noise that sounded like traffic. Diego was calling from somewhere public, probably using a disposable phone that couldn't be traced. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Maria asked, hating herself for the question but knowing she had no choice. "There is a storage facility where the FBI keeps physical evidence from closed cases. Warehouse 47 on the north side of Phoenix. Agent Chen has access to this facility. You will convince her to take you there, and you will destroy every piece of evidence related to case number 2019-4782. The surveillance footage, the photographs, the recordings of your testimony, everything. She'll never agree to that. It's against every rule they have. Then you will have to be creative, won't you? Perhaps you remember some additional details about the case that you need to verify against the evidence. Perhaps you are writing a book about your experience and need to refresh your memory. I'm sure a resourceful woman like yourself can think of something." Maria's mind raced, trying to think of alternatives, escape routes, anything that might save her daughters without destroying her own integrity. "How do I know you'll release them if I do this?" "You don't." Diego's laugh was cold and humorless. "But you know with absolute certainty what will happen if you don't. Your daughters are being held in a location where they are comfortable, but completely isolated. They believe they have been kidnapped for ransom, nothing more. They don't know about their mother's past or why they were taken. I would prefer to keep it that way. I want to talk to them. I want proof they're alive." "Of course you do." There was a rustling sound as if Diego was moving the phone. Then Maria heard a voice that made her heart soar and break simultaneously. "Mom?" Isabella's voice was small and frightened. Nothing like the confident teenager who had kissed Maria goodbye the previous morning. "Mom, are you there?" "Isabella. Baby, are you okay? Is Sophia with you?" "We're okay. These men, they took us when we were walking home from school. They said they just want money and then they'll let us go. Sophia is here, she's scared, but she's not hurt. Mom, just pay them whatever they want, please." The phone was pulled away before Maria could respond and Diego's voice returned. "As you can see, they are unharmed. But my patience has limits. You have 48 hours to complete your task. Agent Chen often has lunch at the cafe on Central Avenue on Thursdays. Today is Wednesday, so you have until tomorrow afternoon to make contact with her. 2 days isn't enough time to plan something like this. Then you had better start planning immediately." Diego's tone suggested the conversation was nearly over. "And Maria, if you contact the police or the FBI about this call, if you tell anyone about our arrangement, your daughters will disappear permanently. We have people everywhere, including inside law enforcement. Don't test me." The line went dead, leaving Maria staring at her phone in stunned silence. Around her, the apartment felt impossibly quiet, the absence of her daughter's voices and laughter creating a void that seemed to swallow all sound. She looked at the family photos covering the refrigerator, Isabella at her graduation ceremony, Sophia proudly displaying a painting she had completed, the three of them together at last year's county fair. Maria walked to the window and looked down at the street below. Everything appeared normal. Cars moved slowly through the morning traffic. People walked their dogs, children waited at the bus stop. But she knew that somewhere in that ordinary world, her daughters were being held prisoner because of a choice she had made 5 years ago to do the right thing. She made herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands and sat down to think. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same government that had failed to protect her family now needed her to betray an agent who had shown her nothing but kindness. Agent Chen had risked her career to keep Maria safe during the trial, working long hours to ensure that Maria's identity remained protected and that she felt supported throughout the ordeal. But as Maria stared at the photos of her daughters, she knew that her choice was already made. She would do whatever Diego Morales demanded, even if it meant destroying everything she believed in. The alternative, losing Isabella and Sophia forever, was unthinkable. She picked up her phone and began searching for Agent Chen's contact information, her hands still trembling as she prepared to take the first step toward betraying the woman who had once saved her life. Maria sat in her parked car outside the Central Avenue cafe for 30 minutes before Agent Sarah Chen arrived. She had practiced her story dozens of times, but her hands still shook as she applied lipstick in the rearview mirror. The weight of what she was about to do felt crushing, but the memory of Isabella's frightened voice on the phone kept her focused. Sarah Chen looked exactly as Maria remembered, a petite woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and graying black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a navy blue pantsuit and carried herself with the confident posture of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. When she spotted Maria through the cafe window, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Maria, what a wonderful surprise." Sarah stood up from her corner table and embraced Maria warmly. "Please sit down."
"How have you been?"
"It's been what, 3 months since I last stopped by the restaurant?" Maria forced a smile as she settled into the opposite chair. "I've been well, thank you. The restaurant keeps me busy." She paused, gathering courage for the lie she was about to tell. "Actually, I was hoping I might run into you. I've been thinking about writing a book about my experience with the trial and everything that happened afterward." Sarah's eyebrows rose with interest. "That's fascinating. A memoir could help other witnesses understand what to expect if they find themselves in similar situations. Have you found a publisher?" "Not yet. I'm still in the early stages, really just organizing my thoughts and memories." Maria fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding Sarah's direct gaze. "The problem is that some of my memories from that time are fuzzy. The stress, you know. I was wondering if there might be a way for me to review some of the evidence from the case, just to help me remember the details correctly." The request hung in the air between them, and Maria watched Sarah's expression carefully. The agent's face showed confusion rather than suspicion, which was encouraging. "I can understand wanting to be accurate," Sarah said slowly. But you know that most of that evidence is sealed and stored in a secure facility. There are very strict protocols about access, especially for ongoing cases. Ongoing, but Carlos Morales was convicted. Isn't the case closed? The conviction stands, yes, but there are still active investigations into other members of the organization. Some of the evidence from your case overlaps with current operations. Sarah leaned forward, her expression concerned. Maria, is everything all right? You seem nervous. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. She had to be careful not to arouse suspicion while still pushing for what she needed. I suppose I am nervous. This book idea feels important to me, but I'm worried about getting the facts wrong. My daughters keep encouraging me to write it, saying that my story could inspire other people to speak up when they witness crimes. The mention of her daughters felt like swallowing glass, but it had the desired effect. Sarah's expression softened with understanding. Isabella and Sophia are such bright girls. How are they doing in school? They're doing well. Maria's voice caught slightly, and she hoped Sarah would interpret it as maternal pride rather than fear. Isabella is applying to colleges, and Sophia is becoming quite the artist. They're the reason I survived all of this, really. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Maria's hand. You're an incredibly brave woman, and you should be proud of what you accomplished. Your testimony put a dangerous criminal behind bars and likely saved countless other victims. The kindness in Sarah's voice made Maria feel sick with guilt, but she pressed on. That's exactly why I want to tell the story properly. I was thinking maybe there's some way we could arrange for me to review just the basic evidence. I wouldn't need to take anything or copy anything. I just want to see the photos and documents to help trigger my memory. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the request against department policies. It's highly irregular, she finally said. But I suppose if you're writing a book that could encourage other witnesses to come forward, it might serve the public interest. Let me make some calls and see what I can arrange. Really? You would do that for me? I'd need to accompany you, of course, and we'd have to follow strict protocols. No phones, no cameras, no notes, and it would have to be soon. I'm being transferred to the Denver office next month. Maria's pulse quickened. Diego had given her 48 hours, and here was Sarah offering exactly what she needed. When do you think we could do it? Let me check my schedule. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through her calendar. I could arrange something for tomorrow afternoon around 2 p.m. Would that work for you? That would be perfect. Maria tried to keep the relief out of her voice. I really appreciate this, Sarah. I know you're bending the rules for me. Just promise me you'll be careful about what you include in the book. Some details need to remain confidential to protect ongoing operations and other witnesses. Of course, I would never do anything to jeopardize another case or put anyone in danger. The irony of those words burned in Maria's throat, but she managed to maintain her composure until they finished their coffee and said goodbye. Sarah promised to call that evening with the final arrangements, and Maria watched her walk away, knowing that she had just manipulated one of the few people in the world who truly cared about her safety. That evening, Maria sat in her empty restaurant after closing time, staring at her phone. She had received Sarah's call confirming their appointment for the next day at the evidence storage facility. The agent had spent 20 minutes explaining the security procedures and emphasizing the importance of confidentiality. The phone rang again at exactly 10 p.m. Diego's voice was as cold as before. I trust you have made progress. We're meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. She's arranged. Access to the evidence storage facility. Excellent. When you arrive at the facility, you will create a distraction that allows you to access the evidence room alone for at least 5 minutes. There is a janitor's closet on the 3rd floor, room 314. Inside, you will find a small device that looks like a USB drive. Plug it into any computer terminal in the evidence room. It will automatically locate and delete all digital files related to case 2019-4782. Maria wrote down the instructions on a napkin, her handwriting barely legible due to her trembling hands. What about the physical evidence? The photographs and documents? There will be matches in the same closet. You will burn any physical evidence you can find. The sprinkler system in that section of the building has been temporarily disabled. You have people inside the facility. We have people everywhere. Maria, remember that if you're tempted to do anything foolish. Diego paused. Your daughters asked about you today. Sophia drew you a picture. She's quite talented. The casual mention of her children's activities while they were being held captive made Maria's stomach churn. I want to talk to them again. After you complete your task. If everything goes according to plan, you will have your daughters back by Friday evening. And if something goes wrong, then you had better make sure nothing goes wrong. The line went dead, leaving Maria alone with her thoughts and the weight of what she had to do. She looked around her restaurant at the photos on the walls and the life she had built after finding the courage to testify against the Morales family. Tomorrow, she would destroy the very evidence that had given her that new life, and she would betray the trust of the one person who had helped her survive the trial. But as she climbed the stairs to her empty apartment, Maria knew that she would do it all without hesitation if it meant holding her daughters again. Some prices were too high to pay, but losing Isabella and Sophia wasn't one of them. She set her alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep, knowing that the next 24 hours would determine whether her family survived or whether her past finally destroyed everything she held dear. The FBI evidence storage facility stood like a fortress on the outskirts of Phoenix, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire. Security cameras monitored every approach, and armed guards checked identification at multiple checkpoints. As Sarah Chen's government sedan approached the main gate, Maria felt like she was entering a prison where she would soon become both the criminal and the victim. Nervous? Sarah asked, glancing at Maria's white knuckles as she gripped her purse. A little. I've never been inside a place like this. Maria tried to inject some curiosity into her voice, though fear dominated her thoughts. Hidden in her purse was a small device that Diego's people had described, along with a book of matches that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. The security process was thorough and intimidating. Maria submitted to a metal detector, surrendered her purse for inspection, and provided her fingerprints for a temporary access badge. A stern-faced guard reviewed her identification multiple times before finally nodding his approval. Sarah guided her through a series of corridors lined with reinforced doors and blinking security panels. The evidence from your case is stored on the 3rd floor, Sarah explained as they entered an elevator. We'll be in a controlled environment with constant video surveillance, so please stay close to me at all times. Maria's heart sank at the mention of video surveillance. Diego's plan had seemed possible when she imagined a simple storage room, but this facility was far more secure than she had expected. As the elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, she began to wonder if she would be able to complete her mission without being caught. The 3rd floor consisted of a long hallway with numbered doors on both sides. Security cameras were mounted every 20 feet, their red recording lights blinking steadily. Sarah led Maria to room 327, where she used her keycard and entered a security code on a digital panel. The heavy door clicked open, revealing a climate-controlled room filled with metal shelving units loaded with labeled boxes and evidence bags. Case 2019-4782 should be in Section C, Sarah said, consulting a tablet computer. Here, I'll show you where they keep the organized files. Maria followed Sarah deeper into the room, her eyes scanning for room 314 where Diego had said she would find the equipment she needed. She spotted it 3 doors down from where they were working, a simple door marked maintenance that looked identical to the others. For the next hour, Sarah methodically showed Maria through boxes of evidence from her case. There were photographs of the crime scene, transcripts of her testimony, recordings of her interviews with FBI agents, and physical evidence collected from the scene where she had witnessed the kidnapping. Seeing it all again brought back memories that Maria had tried hard to forget. The woman's terrified screams, the cold efficiency of the men who had taken her, the endless hours of questioning that followed Maria's call to police. This is the surveillance footage from the parking garage where you saw them, Sarah said, holding up a DVD. Your description was so accurate that we were able to identify all 3 suspects within 48 hours. Maria nodded, though her attention was focused on a computer terminal near the back of the room. The screen showed a login interface for the FBI's evidence database, exactly what she needed to access with Diego's device. But Sarah never left her side, and the video cameras captured every movement they made. Sarah, would it be possible for me to have a few minutes alone with some of this material? Maria asked. I know it sounds strange, but I think I might remember more details if I can concentrate without feeling like I'm being watched. Sarah's expression showed understanding mixed with regret. I wish I could, Maria. But department policy requires that I supervise any civilian access to evidence. These rules exist to protect both the integrity of the cases and the safety of people like you. Maria felt panic rising in her chest. Time was running out and she had no idea how to create the distraction she needed. Then, as if answering her prayers, an alarm began blaring throughout the building. Emergency lights flashed in the hallway, and a recorded voice announced a security breach in the basement level. "What's happening?" Maria asked, though she suspected that Diego's people had orchestrated this diversion. Sarah's radio crackled to life, and a dispatcher's urgent voice filled the room. "All available agents to basement level 2. We have an unauthorized entry and possible theft in progress." Sarah looked torn between her duty to respond to the emergency and her responsibility to supervise Maria. The radio continued to demand backup, and Maria could see her internal struggle. "I should go," Sarah said finally, "but I can't leave you here alone." "What if I waited in the hallway? I promise I won't touch anything or go anywhere." Maria tried to look disappointed but understanding. "Maybe we could continue this another day when there's less chaos." Sarah checked her watch and then looked at the emergency lights still flashing in the corridor. "The elevator requires a key card to operate, so you'll be stuck on this floor anyway. Wait in the hallway near the elevator and I'll be back as soon as possible. Don't move from that spot, okay?" "Of course. Please be careful." Sarah hurried out of the evidence room, her footsteps echoing as she rushed toward the stairwell. Maria waited until she heard the stairwell door slam shut before moving into action. She ran to room 314 and found it unlocked, just as Diego had promised. Inside the maintenance closet, behind a box of cleaning supplies, she found a small device that looked exactly like a USB drive and a book of matches. Back in the evidence room, Maria's hands shook violently as she inserted the device into the computer terminal. The screen immediately began showing file names and deletion progress, as the device automatically located and destroyed every digital record of case 80782. While the computer worked, Maria gathered every piece of physical evidence she could find: photographs, documents, recordings, and evidence bags. The pile of material was larger than she had expected, and Maria realized with horror that burning it all would create an enormous fire that would certainly trigger smoke detectors and sprinkler systems. But Diego had assured her that the sprinklers in this section were disabled, and she had no choice but to trust him. She struck the first match with trembling fingers and held it to a stack of photographs. The images caught fire quickly, and soon Maria had multiple small fires burning throughout the room. The smell of burning paper and plastic filled the air, and smoke began to accumulate near the ceiling. The computer terminal beeped, indicating that the file deletion was complete. Maria removed the device and shoved it into her pocket before adding the last pieces of evidence to the growing flames. The room was becoming thick with smoke, making her eyes water and her breathing difficult. Suddenly, the sprinkler system activated, sending torrents of water cascading down from the ceiling. Diego had lied about disabling the system, and now Maria stood in a flooding room surrounded by the charred remains of evidence while water poured over everything. She realized with growing panic that the fire damage and flooding would make it obvious that someone had deliberately destroyed the evidence. The sound of running footsteps in the hallway announced Sarah's return. Maria had seconds to get out of the evidence room before being discovered, but the hallway security cameras would record her exit. There was no way to hide what she had done. Sarah's voice called out from the elevator. "Maria, are you okay?" "What's that smell?" Maria stepped out of the evidence room just as Sarah rounded the corner. The agent's expression immediately shifted from concern to shock as she saw the smoke pouring from room 327 and the water streaming under the door. "What happened?" "Were you in there?" "The sprinklers just went off," Maria said weakly, knowing that her explanation was inadequate. "There was some kind of electrical fire, I think." Sarah pushed past Maria and entered the evidence room, her face growing pale as she surveyed the destruction. Water continued to pour from the ceiling, and the acrid smell of burned documents filled the air. Where boxes of evidence had once been neatly organized, now only charred fragments and soggy ash remained. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "This is everything from your case. It's all destroyed." Maria watched Sarah's face as the realization dawned that this was no accident. The agent's kind eyes hardened as she turned to face Maria, and for the first time since they had met, Maria saw suspicion and anger in her expression. "Maria, I need you to tell me exactly what happened here, and please don't lie to me." But before Maria could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message that made her blood run cold. "Job well done. Your daughters are waiting for you at home." Sarah Chen stood in the doorway of the destroyed evidence room, water dripping from her hair and smoke stinging her eyes. The expression on her face was a mixture of betrayal, anger, and professional calculation as she studied Maria's guilty expression. The security breach downstairs was a diversion, wasn't it? Sarah's voice was calm, but Maria could hear the fury beneath the surface. While I was responding to a false alarm, you destroyed 5 years' worth of evidence that could have kept other victims safe. Maria opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The weight of what she had done crashed over her like a physical blow. She had not only betrayed Sarah's trust but potentially put countless other people at risk. The evidence she had destroyed might have been crucial to stopping other crimes, saving other families from the horror that trafficking victims endured. I can explain, Maria finally managed, though she knew no explanation could justify her actions. Then explain. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her service weapon, not drawing it but establishing the psychological dynamic that Maria was now a suspect, rather than a friend. Start with who forced you to do this, because I know you well enough to know that you wouldn't destroy evidence unless someone was threatening, something you cared about more than your own life. The accuracy of Sarah's assessment was so precise that Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. Even now, even after being betrayed, the agent was trying to understand rather than simply condemn. They have my daughters, Maria whispered. Isabella and Sophia. They've been missing since Tuesday afternoon. Sarah's expression immediately softened, though her professional alertness remained. Who has them? The Morales family? Diego Morales. He called me yesterday morning and said he would kill them unless I destroyed the evidence from Carlos's case. Maria's words tumbled out in a rush. 3 days of terror and guilt finally finding release. He said Carlos would be eligible for parole if the evidence disappeared, and that this was payback for what I did 5 years ago. Sarah pulled out her radio and spoke quickly into it. This is Agent Chen. I need a full tactical response team at the Rodriguez residence immediately. 2 juveniles, ages 13 and 17, possible hostage situation connected to the Morales organization. Approach with extreme caution, no. Maria grabbed Sarah's arm. He said he has people everywhere, including in law enforcement. If you send agents to my house, he'll know immediately. Maria, your daughters may already be dead. This could be a trap to get you to destroy the evidence before killing all 3 of you. Sarah's bluntness was harsh but necessary. We need to act on the assumption that they're still alive. But we can't trust anything Diego Morales tells you. The possibility that Isabella and Sophia were already dead had haunted Maria for the past 3 days, but hearing it spoken aloud made her legs buckle. Sarah caught her arm and guided her to a chair in the hallway while building security, and FBI personnel began arriving on the scene. Tell me everything, Sarah said, kneeling beside Maria's chair. Every phone call, every instruction, every detail you can remember. Maria recounted the past 3 days in detail. From the girl's disappearance to Diego's phone calls to the equipment she had found in the maintenance closet, Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on her phone. When Maria finished, the agent was quiet for a long moment. The device you used to delete the files, do you still have it? Maria reached into her pocket and handed over the small USB drive. Sarah examined it carefully before sealing it in an evidence bag. This is sophisticated equipment, probably military grade. Diego didn't just decide to target you this week. They've been planning this operation for months, maybe years. Sarah stood up and began pacing the hallway. The question is whether the distraction downstairs was meant to help you destroy evidence or to get you caught in the act. What do you mean? Think about it, Maria. If Diego wanted the evidence destroyed quietly, he could have arranged for the building to burn down or for someone to break in when no one was around. Instead, he chose a plan that guaranteed you would be identified as the person responsible. Sarah's expression was grim. I think you've been set up to take the fall for something much bigger than destroying evidence. Before Maria could respond, Sarah's phone rang. She answered it immediately, and Maria watched her face grow pale as she listened to the caller. When? Sarah asked. How many victims? A pause. We're on our way. Sarah ended the call and turned to Maria with an expression of barely controlled rage. That was the Phoenix Police Department. They just raided a warehouse on the south side of town based on an anonymous tip. They found evidence of a major human trafficking operation. Dozens of victims, some of them children. Maria felt a spark of hope. Did they find Isabella and Sophia? No, but they found something else. Documents showing that Carlos Morales was never the head of the trafficking operation. He was a middleman taking orders from someone higher up in the organization. Sarah grabbed Maria's arm. Your testimony 5 years ago sent the wrong man to prison, and the real leader has been operating freely ever since. The revelation hit Maria like a physical blow. Everything she had believed about the trial, about justice being served, had been a lie. But the evidence, the witness testimony, the convictions, were all carefully orchestrated to protect the real criminal. Carlos Morales pled guilty and accepted a 25-year sentence in exchange for his family's safety, and a guarantee that the real boss would remain hidden. Sarah was speaking quickly now, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. But Carlos is getting older in prison, and Diego is worried that he might eventually decide to tell the truth. Destroying your testimony and evidence removes the foundation for the original case, making it impossible to prove that Carlos wasn't the real leader. So my daughters were kidnapped to cover up a lie that's 5 years old. Your daughters were kidnapped because you're the only witness who can identify the real head of the trafficking ring. Sarah's voice was urgent now. Maria, think back to that night 5 years ago. Were there 4 men instead of 3? Someone standing in the shadows, giving orders but not participating directly. Maria closed her eyes and forced herself to remember that terrible night. She had been so focused on the woman being forced into the sedan, and the 3 men handling her, that she hadn't paid attention to the surrounding area. But now, with Sarah's prompting, she recalled a figure standing near a second car, someone who had seemed to be watching rather than participating. There was someone else, she said slowly. A man in an expensive coat standing by a silver Mercedes. He never touched the woman, but the other men kept looking at him as if they were waiting for his approval. Can you describe him? Tall, well-dressed, maybe 50 years old. He had gray hair and wore glasses, but I never got a clear look at his face because he stayed in the shadows. Sarah was already pulling up photos on her phone. Look at these pictures and tell me if any of them look familiar. Maria studied the phone screen, which showed a series of police mugshots and surveillance photos. Most of the faces meant nothing to her, but when Sarah swiped to the 4th image, Maria's breath caught in her throat. That's him. That's the man who was standing by the Mercedes. Sarah stared at the photo with an expression of disbelief. This is Judge Robert Harrison. He's been the presiding judge in organized crime cases for the past decade, including Carlos Morales' trial. The implications of this revelation were staggering. A federal judge had been running a human trafficking operation while presiding over the trials of his own subordinates. He had sent Carlos Morales to prison not for justice, but to eliminate a potential threat to his own operation. He's been using his position to protect the trafficking ring while appearing to prosecute it, Sarah continued. And now that Carlos might be willing to talk in exchange for early parole, Judge Harrison needs to eliminate any evidence that could expose the truth. Maria's phone buzzed with another text message. This time the message was longer and more detailed. Your task is complete, but there is one final requirement. Agent Chen knows too much and has become a threat to my operation. You will kill her, or your daughters will die slowly while you listen to their screams. Sarah read the message over Maria's shoulder, and for the first time since entering the evidence facility, she looked genuinely afraid. He's not going to release your daughters, Sarah said quietly. He can't afford to leave any witnesses alive, including you. Then what do? We fight back, and we pray that your daughters are still alive long enough for us to find them. Sarah Chen moved with the practiced efficiency of a seasoned federal agent as she led Maria through the corridors of the evidence facility. But Maria could see the tension in her shoulders and the way her hand hovered near her weapon. They both knew that Judge Harrison's demand for Sarah's death meant that their time was running out rapidly. We need to get you somewhere safe while I coordinate a search for your daughters, Sarah said as they reached the elevator. Harrison will expect you to follow his instructions, which gives us a small window of opportunity. I'm not going anywhere safe while Isabella and Sophia are still missing. Maria's voice carried a determination that surprised even her. If Harrison wants me to kill you, it means he's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Sarah studied Maria's face as they descended to the ground floor. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that a federal judge can't run a trafficking operation without help from other people in positions of power. Police officers, prosecutors, maybe other judges. Maria's mind was working quickly now, adrenaline sharpening her focus. If we can identify his network, we might be able to figure out where he's holding my daughters. That's dangerous thinking. Maria, we don't know who we can trust. Then we don't trust anyone except each other. As they reached the lobby, Sarah's phone rang again. She looked at the caller ID and frowned. It's my supervisor. He shouldn't know about this yet. I haven't filed a report. Sarah answered the call, and Maria watched her expression grow increasingly concerned as she listened. The conversation was brief and one-sided, with Sarah mostly saying yes, sir, and understood. We have a problem, Sarah said after ending the call. My supervisor wants to see both of us immediately. He says there's been a development in your case that requires immediate debriefing. How could he know about any of this? You said you hadn't reported what happened yet. I hadn't, which means someone else told him. Sarah's face was grim. Maria, I think Judge Harrison's network includes people in my own office. They stood in the lobby, unsure whether to leave the building or stay where security cameras could provide some protection. Maria's phone buzzed again, and this time the message contained a photo that made her scream. The image showed Isabella and Sophia tied to chairs in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. Both girls looked terrified but unharmed. Isabella's school uniform was torn and Sophia had been crying, but they were alive. Below the photo was a message. You have 2 hours to kill Agent Chen and bring me proof of her death. The warehouse address will be sent when your task is complete. Sarah looked at the photo and immediately began taking screenshots. I'm sending this to the FBI's image analysis team. They might be able to identify the location from background details. He said I have 2 hours. And he's lying. Even if you killed me, Harrison would never let your daughters go free. They've seen too much. Sarah grabbed Maria's arm. But this photo tells us something important. He's keeping them in Phoenix. Probably somewhere he can monitor easily. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Agent Chen, your presence is requested at 1247 Industrial Boulevard immediately. Come alone or the Rodriguez girls will suffer. It's a trap, Maria said immediately. Of course it's a trap, but it's also our only lead. Sarah was already moving toward the exit. Harrison wants us separated so he can eliminate us one at a time. If we stay together, we might have a chance. What about your supervisor? Won't he send people looking for us? Let him. If he's working with Harrison, the more resources they waste chasing us, the less they have available to move your daughters. Sarah's tactical training was taking over, and Maria could see her analyzing options and calculating risks. But we need backup that we can trust. Who can we trust if your own office might be compromised? Sarah was quiet for a moment as they walked to her car. There's one person who might help us. Detective Ray Castellanos with Phoenix PD. He worked the original kidnapping case that led to your testimony, and he's been suspicious about the light sentences some trafficking defendants have received. They drove through Phoenix's afternoon traffic in Sarah's unmarked sedan, both women constantly checking mirrors for signs of surveillance. Sarah made several turns designed to detect anyone following them, and Maria found herself impressed by the agent's professional paranoia. There, Sarah said, pointing to a small coffee shop in a strip mall. Ray said he'd meet us there in 20 minutes. Detective Castellanos was a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes that suggested he had seen too much in his career. He listened without interruption as Sarah and Maria explained the situation, occasionally asking for clarification, but never expressing disbelief at the scope of the conspiracy they were describing. I've suspected for years that someone high up was protecting the trafficking networks, he said when they finished. Too many cases where solid evidence mysteriously disappeared or where judges handed down sentences that were way too light. He pulled out a tablet and showed them a map of Phoenix. If Harrison is holding your daughters somewhere he can monitor easily, it's probably in one of these 3 areas where his people have been active. The map showed 3 locations on the outskirts of the city, an industrial complex near the airport, a series of abandoned warehouses in the old manufacturing district, and a construction site that had been stalled for months due to legal disputes. 1247. Industrial Boulevard is here, Ray said, pointing to the manufacturing district. It's isolated with good access routes for moving people in and out quickly. Sarah studied the map carefully. If we approach directly, they'll see us coming from miles away. But if we can get close enough to identify which building they're using, I might be able to help with that, Ray said. I've been running surveillance on that area for weeks as part of another investigation. I know the layout and the security patterns. Maria's phone buzzed with another message. 1 hour remaining. Agent Chen dies or your daughters die. Choose wisely. We're out of time for planning, Maria said. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Sarah checked her service weapon and looked at Ray. How do you feel about conducting an unauthorized rescue operation that could end both our careers? Ray smiled grimly. At my age, I'm more worried about my conscience than my pension. Let's go get those girls. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Maria grabbed Sarah's arm. Promise me something. If it comes down to a choice between saving my daughters and stopping Harrison, you'll choose my daughters. Sarah met her eyes with complete honesty. I promise. But Maria, I don't think we'll have to choose. I think saving your daughters and stopping Harrison are the same thing. They drove toward the industrial district as the sun began to set over Phoenix. 3 unlikely allies united by their determination to expose corruption and save 2 innocent girls. Behind them, Judge Harrison's network was mobilizing to stop them. And ahead lay a confrontation that would determine whether justice could triumph over power and corruption. Maria looked out the window at the passing city and thought about Isabella and Sophia, probably terrified and wondering if their mother would ever find them. She had already lost so much to the Morales family and their criminal enterprise. Tonight, she would either lose everything or finally find a way to fight back against the forces that had controlled her life for 5 years. The warehouse district loomed ahead, dark and silent except for the occasional truck rumbling past on the main road. Somewhere in those shadows, her daughters were waiting for rescue, and Judge Harrison was preparing for what he believed would be his final victory over the woman who had dared to testify against his organization. The warehouse at 1247 Industrial Boulevard stood silhouetted against the darkening Phoenix sky like a monument to abandoned dreams. Detective Castellanos parked his unmarked car 3 blocks away, and the 3 unlikely allies studied the building through binoculars. The structure was massive, easily capable of hiding dozens of people and surrounded by a chain-link fence that had been cut in several places. 2 guards at the main entrance, Ray reported quietly, another one walking the perimeter. I can see at least 3 vehicles parked behind the building. Sarah adjusted her binoculars and focused on the upper windows. There's light coming from the 2nd floor, eastern side. That's probably where they're holding Isabella and Sophia. Maria's hand shook as she gripped her own binoculars. After 4 days of terror and uncertainty, she was finally close enough to see the building where her daughters were being held prisoner. How do we get inside without them knowing we're coming? We don't, Ray said bluntly. This isn't a stealth mission anymore. Harrison knows we're coming and he's prepared for us. Our only advantage is that he doesn't know we're working together. Sarah's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She looked at Maria and Ray before answering. This is Agent Chen. Judge Harrison's voice was smooth and confident, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Agent Chen, I'm disappointed that you chose not to come alone. Detective Castellanos, Mrs. Rodriguez, I trust you can hear me as well. The casual revelation that he knew exactly where they were and who they were with sent chills down Maria's spine. Harrison's reach was even more extensive than they had imagined. Where are my daughters? Maria demanded, grabbing the phone from Sarah. They are safe, Mrs. Rodriguez, but their continued well-being depends on your cooperation. I'm going to give you one final opportunity to resolve this situation peacefully. There's nothing peaceful about kidnapping children. Harrison's laugh was cold and condescending. Children? Your daughters are hardly children anymore. Isabella is 17, old enough to make her own choices about her future. Sophia is 13, certainly old enough to understand the consequences of her mother's actions. The implied threat in his words made Maria's blood run cold. What do you want? I want Agent Chen to walk through the front door of the warehouse alone and unarmed. When she does, I will release your daughters unharmed. You have my word as a federal judge. Your word means nothing, Sarah said, taking the phone back. You've been running a trafficking operation while pretending to prosecute it. You sent an innocent man to prison to protect yourself. Carlos Morales was hardly innocent. Agent Chen, he was simply guilty of different crimes than the ones for which he was convicted. Harrison's tone remained maddeningly calm. But this conversation is becoming tedious. You have 10 minutes to enter the warehouse, or I will begin sending Mrs. Rodriguez pieces of her daughters. The line went dead, leaving the 3 of them staring at each other in the growing darkness. I'm going in, Sarah said immediately. It's suicide, Ray protested. He'll kill you the moment you walk through that door. Maybe. But if I don't go in, he'll definitely kill Isabella and Sophia. Sarah checked her weapon one final time. Besides, I don't plan to go in quietly. Maria grabbed Sarah's arm. There has to be another way. There is. Sarah smiled grimly. We're going to give Harrison exactly what he wants, a distraction. Ray, how long do you need to get into position at the back of the building? 5 minutes if I move fast. And Maria, can you create a scene at the front gate that will draw the guards' attention? Maria looked at the warehouse and thought about her daughters trapped somewhere inside. What kind of scene? The kind only a desperate mother can create. Scream, cry, demand to see your children. Make them focus on you instead of watching for other threats. Sarah was already moving toward the fence. Give me 3 minutes to get close to the building. Then start your performance. Ray disappeared into the shadows between the abandoned buildings, moving with surprising stealth for a man of his size. Sarah began working her way around the perimeter of the warehouse, staying low and using parked trucks for cover. Maria watched them both disappear into the darkness before walking directly toward the main gate. The guards saw her coming from 100 yards away. She made no attempt at stealth, instead striding purposefully toward the fence while shouting at the top of her lungs. Where are my daughters? I know you have them. I want to see Isabella and Sophia right now. The guards were young men with the hard expressions of people who had seen violence and inflicted it themselves. They approached the fence with weapons drawn but seemed uncertain about how to handle a screaming woman who was clearly unarmed. Lady, you need to back away from this property, one of them called out. I'm not going anywhere until I see my children. Maria grabbed the chain-link fence and shook it violently. You kidnapped 2 innocent girls and I want them back. More guards appeared from inside the warehouse, drawn by the commotion Maria was creating. She could see them talking into radios, probably alerting their supervisors that the situation was becoming unpredictable. From somewhere inside the building came the sound of splintering wood and shouting voices. Sarah had found her way inside and was creating her own distraction. The guards at the fence looked confused, torn between dealing with Maria and responding to the crisis behind them. Then the shooting started. The sound of gunfire echoed through the warehouse district as Sarah engaged Harrison's men somewhere inside the building. Maria could hear different weapons firing, handguns, automatic rifles, and the distinctive crack of Sarah's service pistol. The guards at the fence abandoned their posts and rushed toward the warehouse, leaving Maria alone at the perimeter. She didn't hesitate. Maria squeezed through one of the holes in the fence and ran toward the building, following the sound of gunfire and her maternal instincts. The main entrance was unguarded now, and she could hear chaos echoing from multiple floors of the warehouse. Inside, the building was a maze of shipping containers, abandoned machinery, and makeshift rooms created with plastic sheeting and plywood. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that made it difficult to distinguish between threats and obstacles. Maria could hear Sarah shouting commands somewhere above her, and the sound of running footsteps suggested that the battle was moving through the building. A scream that she recognized as Isabella's voice came from the eastern side of the second floor. Maria found a staircase and climbed toward the sound, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and hope. She had no weapon and no training, but she was a mother whose children were in danger, and that made her more dangerous than any armed guard. At the top of the stairs, she found a corridor lined with makeshift cells. Most were empty, but behind one door she could hear voices. Isabella trying to comfort Sophia, both of them clearly terrified by the gunfight raging around them. Isabella, Sophia, Maria called out, and she heard her daughter's voices respond immediately. Mom, we're here. The door is locked. Maria looked around desperately for something to break down the door. The lock was substantial, designed to keep prisoners inside, but the door itself was just plywood mounted on a basic frame. She found a metal pipe among the warehouse debris and began attacking the door with desperate fury. Mrs. Rodriguez. Maria spun around to find Judge Harrison standing at the far end of the corridor. He was impeccably dressed despite the chaos around them, and he held a silver revolver with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to holding power over others. Your daughters are remarkably brave young women, he said conversationally. Isabella has been trying to keep Sophia calm, and Sophia has been drawing pictures to pass the time. Under different circumstances, I might have found them useful additions to my organization. Let them go. This is between you and me. Indeed it is. You cost me a great deal of money and caused significant disruption to my operations. Carlos Morales was a useful scapegoat, but his arrest forced me to restructure my entire network. Harrison raised the revolver and aimed it at Maria's chest. I had hoped to resolve this quietly, but you've forced me to take more direct action. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Ray Castellanos' arrival. The detective appeared at the top of the staircase with his weapon drawn, creating a three-way standoff in the narrow corridor. Judge Robert Harrison, you're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy, Ray announced formally. Harrison smiled coldly. Detective Castellanos, you're operating outside your jurisdiction and without backup. Even if you arrest me, who do you think will prosecute the case? I have allies throughout the justice system. Maybe, but Maria's daughters have allies too. The voice came from behind Harrison, and all three adults turned to see Sarah Chen emerging from a side corridor. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and her clothes were torn, but her weapon was steady as she aimed it at the judge. It's over, Harrison. We've already transmitted evidence of your operation to the FBI's corruption task force in Washington. Your network is finished. For the first time, Judge Harrison's composure cracked. His eyes darted between Taugi decided in the corridor outside. You done.